If you're interested in growing vegetables from home, then this is the video for you. Let me show you some tips and tricks to grow your own vegetables from seed. The first place we need to start is what container to use when planting seedlings. Now you could use something big like this. This is a 200 cell seedling tray. You could use something as simple as this. You see this at all or most nurseries, or something like this, or even styrofoam cups if you have. You can even sow directly your seeds into your plant boxes or your garden beds. Now we move over to seeds, and the first question you need to ask yourself is, what season should I plant them in? Because some seeds, they like to only germinate when it's warm weather, and some seeds only germinate when it's cool temperatures. Like for example, I have beans over here. Now on your seed packets, when you're buying something like this, it will tell you which season they want to be planted in. On this pack, it tells me that it wants to be planted in summer. So I won't be planting it now because you might be able to see it's a bit too cold still. So I'll wait to plant this for a bit later in the year when the temperatures warm up. You may find success growing out of season if you are growing indoors, maybe using artificial lighting and artificial heating, or maybe even a greenhouse. But those things obviously would apply an additional cost. Next question I would ask is the vegetable I'm trying to grow, does it prefer to be directly sown into the ground, or is it okay with being transplanted? Let me explain. Some vegetables like carrots over here, these are carrot seeds. Carrots, they don't like being transplanted. If I were to grow these carrots in a tray like this, and once they're grown a bit like that size, and I transplant them into the ground where they will now have their final growing space, when it's time to harvest those carrots in a couple of months, the carrots will come out all straggly. They won't come out as that neat long taproot that you normally see, and that's because the carrot has a taproot. Then there are some vegetables that are okay with being transplanted but perform better if they are sown directly. Corn, beans, peas, butternut, watermelon, those are vegetables that prefer to be directly sown, but they do well, they do fine if they are transplanted. So you could grow sweet corn in a tray like this. When the sweet corn is a certain height, maybe about that height, you can transplant them and they will grow perfectly fine. You will get your sweet corn. But I think they would perform a lot better if you sow them directly in ground. As you can see, seeds come in different sizes. So this brings up our third question. How deep do I need to plant my seeds? As a general rule, if your seed, for example, this is a butternut seed that I have over here. This seed is about 1 centimeter long. As a general rule, you would want to make the hole 2 centimeters deep. So if I have a seed that's a half a centimeter in size, I would want to make the hole 1 centimeter deep. The general rule is you'd want to make the depth of the planting hole double the size of the seed. And as you can see with something like a carrot seed, which I can't show you like this, but over here we have the carrot seeds. They are very small, so they just need a light sprinkling of the soil on top of it, and that will be fine. Next question, how many seeds should I plant in one spot? So that really depends on the germination rate of the seeds that you are sowing. For example, tomato plants have a very high germination rate. I would just plant 1 or 2 tomato seeds in one spot. But these pepper plants, or pepper seeds I mean, I don't know what their germination rate would be. It's still not the perfect conditions for them to be growing in. So I'm unsure that I will get a good germination rate with these seeds. So I'll plant 3 or 4 seeds in one spot, right? But I'm not letting all the plants grow in that one spot. Once I see that there are multiple plants that have germinated, that have sprouted, I will select the weakest looking seedlings and I will snip them. This is called thinning. I only want one plant to be growing in a cell this size. So I will select the weakest ones and cut them and let the strongest one survive and let that grow in here, so that I only have one plant growing in one cell. In total, in a 6-pack like this, I only want 6 plants growing in this tray. And on the same topic, these are beetroot seeds. Now the thing about beetroot seeds is they are multiple seeds that are in a cluster. So I could be planting one beetroot seed, planting it in a week's time, I will see multiple seedlings sprout out because there are a bunch of seeds connected to each other. So just keep that in mind. With something like beetroot, I won't have to plant multiple seeds or seed clusters in one spot. Just one will be fine because there are already a cluster of seeds together. thinning out your seedlings is very important to make sure that they are not overcrowded, that they don't steal nutrients from each other, they don't steal water from each other. Plants need the proper spacing. Keep that in mind. The next set of criteria for growing seedlings is our soil medium. One of the conditions that we want for our soil medium is that it must have good drainage. Good drainage means that it's a soil medium that holds on to moisture, but it allows for drainage of excess moisture. As you can see, it's dripping out. That doesn't mean that the soil medium isn't holding onto the water, because if I were to take out of the soil, you can see that it is wet, but I poured too much water and now it's allowing for that excess water to fall out. This is also important that you have a container that has drainage holes, because it's no use that you have a soil that has good drainage but the container doesn't have enough drainage holes. Drainage for plants is very important because roots actually need oxygen, and when they are sitting in too much water, that is when diseases come in and all sorts of other problems that will cause the seedling to die. Another condition that you want for your soil medium is that it must be light and not heavy. If you're using things like sand or clay in your seedling mix, those are things that typically make your soil medium heavy. Now don't get me wrong, having sand and clay in your seedling mix isn't a problem as long as it's a small percentage of that seedling mix. Now the reason why you don't want your seedling mix to be heavy is two reasons. If you think of the size of the seeds that you're busy trying to grow and the plant, the size of the plant that's trying to push out through the soil, that plant doesn't have a lot of strength at first. So the soil on top of that seed shouldn't be so heavy that the plant struggles to break through. The other reason is if your soil medium is light, then it allows for your roots to move through the tray a lot easier. Remember, these trays isn't a lot of space for your roots to move around, right? So the space that they do have, they need to be able to move easily through that, and that's why cocoa peat this year is a big component of a good seedling mix. Cocoa peat is actually made from the husk of a coconut. It's been shredded up fine to have this appearance, and this is what makes your soil mix very light. But there's one problem with cocoa peat that you need to adjust for. Cocoa peat, as well as other soil amendments like perlite and vermiculite, they are inert, meaning they have no nutritional value for the seedlings to feed off from. And this isn't a problem if you add fertilizer to your cocoa peat seedling mix. What you'll see from wholesale plant nurseries is that they fertilize their plants through the irrigation. This is called fertigation. But if setting up an irrigation system or having to remember to fertilize your plants regularly isn't practical for you, then it's best to add the fertilizer to your seedling mix before you start planting. Fun fact with seeds, once the seed germinates and you have that little plant coming out, the shell of the seed, this is a butternut seed that we're looking at, the shell of this butternut seed decomposes and provides food for that plant. In order for that seedling to grow to its full potential, you will need to add additional food into that soil mix for that plant to grow well. But there is some food that the seedling will get from the decomposing of the shell. Now let me talk to you about the actual tools that we use. In this example, I'll be using a 200 cell seedling tray, and I'll be using this stationary tray to sift my soil medium. And I'll explain to you why we're sifting it, and I'll explain to you what goes into the seedling tray as I'm sifting the soil. I want you to have a close look at the soil medium. You can see that there's cocoa peat in here. There's also vermiculite or perlite in here. Now vermiculite and perlite, those are things that help with the drainage of the soil. Is that essential for a growing mix, for a seedling mix? No, it's not. As long as you have good compost in there, that helps with the drainage of the soil. Now there is also compost in here, there's worm castings in here, and there's big chunks of bark like this. As great as this seedling mix is for growing seeds, this bark actually becomes a very big problem, and that is why we are sifting the soil. This soil mix was purchased, but you can make up your own seedling mix if you want. You just need to get maybe a block of cocoa peat. You can get perlite and vermiculite if that's in your budget. It's not really necessary, although it does help. And you'd need to get worm castings and compost. The thing about compost is that you'd need to sift it like I'm doing here, because there might be chunks in there that's still decomposing, that's not fine enough for it to go into a tray like this. The reason why we are sifting these materials is because We don't want a big piece of bark like this sitting on top of the seed. Imagine if this piece of bark was sitting on top of the seed wouldn't be getting water, and if it did get any moisture, the seed would struggle to break through this piece of bark because it is a bit heavy. So I've sifted a bit of soil onto the tray, and I'm just pushing and spreading the seedling mix to make sure that I get every single cell. It's also a good idea to just give it a light tap to make sure that it's nice and compressed. I'm not saying that you must use your full strength and push the soil down, but a little pressure is good just to make sure that you don't have a big air pockets. This material won't be going to waste. Even though I can't use it in my seedling mix, this can be used as a mulch. It will make a really good mulch in other parts of my garden. So this is a bought potting soil that I'm sifting out and making it essentially a seedling mix. And the seedling mix already has nutrients for the plants inside it. The nutrients is either coming from compost or worm castings. Either way, I won't have to give this tray any extra fertilizer. There should be enough food in every cell for the plants that will be growing until the point that they are ready to be taken out of the tray. Another tip that I want to give you is you need to label what it is that you're planting. On the label, it should have the planting date and the crop that you are growing. Now let's talk about watering. It's very important, especially if you are working with small seeds, that you don't water the tray with a high pressure. Watering with a high pressure will cause the seed to be washed away or will cause the seed to come up to the surface, in which case it won't germinate. I would highly recommend watering with a misting function. And remember to not overwater. Overwatering will cause the excess water to drip out through the bottom, and when that happens, the nutrients that the plant will need for the whole month that it will be in the tray will also be dripping out with the water. So try your best to avoid overwatering. The last thing I need you to look out for is not exposing your seedling tray to enough sunlight. If this happens and your seedlings are not getting enough sunlight, there will be signs. Your seedlings will become leggy. This is when your seedlings become really long and weak. That's all the tips I have for now. All the best with your planting.